in reference to the fascinating world that existed in the past. When viewed from our contemporary perspective, the institution of marriage in Rome appeared to be rather different from what we are accustomed to. When the decision was made to be married back then, love was not a factor in the decision. In addition to devoting your entire life to a single person who is truly remarkable, when the decision was made to be married back then, love was not a factor in the decision. In addition to devoting your entire life to a single person who is truly remarkable. To put it another way, it was rather similar to the process of putting together a robust family unit or a business deal. The habit of Roman spouses cheating on their wives ought to have been exceedingly common, and it ought to have even been anticipated from the beginning. During the time that the affairs were taking place, they were not nearly as embarrassing or concealable as they may be now. Many of the males in the group were known to have had sexual encounters with courtesans, for a brief length of time, or possibly with a loving partner for an extended period of time without being married. This was the case for a considerable proportion of the males in the group. Obviously, that is not the conclusion of the matter. Men in Roman society were frequently seen engaged in romantic or sexual relationships with one another. Additionally, there is the issue of relationships with other males in the world. In addition, a great number of individuals believed that this was something that occurred on a daily basis in their life. In order to have a comprehensive understanding of how the Romans, it is vital for us to let go of our notions about relationships once we have spent some time considering love and desire. Instead, we should look at the situation from the perspectives of the individuals involved. There was a significant relationship between being married, having power, and being able to genuinely be pleased. In their day-to-day existence, the ancient Romans did not make use of product labels in any way. As a person who identifies as gay, straight, or bisexual, as is customary in today's society, identification is defined as the individual's sexual orientation. From the point of view of the individuals who were involved in the link, on the other hand, they were more concerned with determining who was in command of the situation. In the context of a conventional man-woman couple, the male was thought to be the one who dominated and supplied for the relationship, while the woman was considered to be the one who was receiving the benefits of the partnership. Not only was the nature of the relationship the subject of this conversation, but it was also the emphasis of the conversation. It was also about establishing who was in charge of the situation, which was another important aspect. The circumstance grew a great deal more complicated as soon as there were two men involved in the affair. To accomplish this assignment is a challenging endeavor. At the same time, it was essential to possess one of them, the role of the recipient, which the Romans regarded as being more subservient and feminine in character to begin with. There was little doubt that the function was commonly linked to a social stigma. This stigma is primarily emphasized on the younger partner due to the fact that she is still an adolescent. However, it is not necessarily applicable to adult males. This is because the younger spouse is still a teenager. This is a type that is well known in the sector where it is offered. A relationship between people of the same gender was what they referred to as the relationship. The term pedestrian is used to describe it. One group of older men, known as the arisers, formed a connection with another group of young people, known as the Iromaninos, inside the framework of this circumstance. Having said that, it was certainly not merely a romantic or intimate relationship between the two of them. Through the provision of guidance, assistance, and guidance from more experienced individuals, the objective of these kinds of partnerships was to improve one's standing in society. The existence of connections like these was not uncommon. In light of this, there are huge age gaps between the individuals who are involved in these partnerships. which was not as unexpected to me as I had thought it to be, within the context of the modern day, and especially among those who are wealthy and powerful. At the time when a young man was making the transition into maturity, it was considered to be a normal part of the process for him to join the Roman elite. It was because of this that the young man was able to establish important connections and have the opportunity to enter the world of politics. Even generals, emperors, monarchs, and other great individuals who held political positions in Rome were among those who were included in this group. There was no doubt that they were among the most influential people in the city-state. There was nothing out of the ordinary about the circumstances in any manner. Both males and females should be able to compete for possible spouses. In what specific way is it? Taking into account the fact that this was not deemed to be cheating, at least not in the way that we use the term today, it is quite astonishing. So far as this goes, during my earlier years, there were no methods of birth control that were readily available, and giving birth was considered to be one of the most hazardous events that a woman could possibly go through. But when a man had relations outside of marriage, especially in comparison to other men, it was sometimes viewed as a way to protect his wife from being in danger, and it was one of the unique and useful ancient techniques of birth control. This was especially true in comparison to other men. In particular, this was the case when compared to several other men. One can argue that it makes sense. It was normal practice to anticipate that the person with greater authority, such as an emperor, would be the one to speak up when it came to partnerships between persons of the same gender. This was typically the case when it came to partnership situations. When a male assumes a position of authority, the demonstration of his power and authority was accomplished through the use of this strategy. It is important to note that Roman civilization did not always conform to its own norms in the past, especially when contrasted to other societies. In point of fact, it is not out of the question that even the most powerful men were unable to live up to these expectations. It is possible that you will be taken aback by the notion that Julius Caesar was one of the most well-known emperors in the history of the Roman Empire. The fact that history was married to a person of the same sex who was generally more obedient was apparently something that history took pleasure in about herself. A significant number of individuals were taken aback by the news at the time, and it caused Romans to engage in meaningless conversation, leaving them both perplexed and baffled at the same time because it did not conform to the idea of a powerful and dominant leader. To a significant degree, he was not like other Romans in any way. For those who are in positions of control, Emperor Hadrian is primarily responsible for the fact that he chose to marry a woman for political purposes. Outwardly, it would appear that the two of them did not have any genuine feelings of love or desire for one another. In the entirety of her life, to a considerable extent, historians share the same point of view. Although they were in close proximity to one another, they did not even have a physical relationship. The question is, what is the connection between the fact that Rene and his spouse had both engaged in Rene's program, which provided them with a huge number of their own lovers, was the impetus for the development of this idea? The majority of his attention was directed toward the individuals who were male. My first impression of the young man was one that was really powerful. Antinous is a young man who is not only magnificently beautiful, but also extraordinarily bright. During their time together, Hadrian experienced a strong love for him. He took measures to ensure that Antinous, the recipient, had an education of the highest possible caliber, and the two of them traveled together across the entirety of the empire. Sadly, the formidable partnership that they shared came to an end. The manner in which Antonius' Nile River passed away when they were in Egypt is still a mystery. He passed away while they were there. Hadrian, who was experiencing a great deal of emotional distress, proceeded to go to extraordinary measures in order to save his honor. He constructed an entire city from the ground up, beginning with the foundation. The name was given to it in Antoninus's honor because it is situated in close proximity to the location where he passed away. In addition to this, he made arrangements for the transportation of the mummified remains of Antinous to Rome through the entire process. It went so far as to include having coins minted in the likeness of Antinous, which Hadrian went to great lengths to accomplish. The declaration that they made stated that he was not just a deity but also something else, unusually rare in the extreme. Antoninus was viewed in extremely high esteem that extended throughout the rest of the empire. Hadrian was not the only emperor who had a love connection that developed into a romantic relationship during that time period. Another point to consider is that Emperor Nero had love relationships with males, despite the fact that even the Romans were astonished by his antics. He actively sought for connections with males. There are a substantial number of monarchs who chose their lovers and palace slaves, and they continue to treat them as if they were servants over their whole reign. Despite this, Nero carried out a strategy that was quite different from what you could have predicted and was completely unexpected. Among the numerous tasks that he carried out, he was responsible for performing his wedding ceremonies and customs. She chose to marry a man named Pythagoras, who had been a slave in the past. This was one of the instances. However, Nero was the one who portrayed the part of the bride in the theatrical production. Pythagoras, who happened to be wearing a veil at the time, took on the role of the groom. Because of this, the general population was left bewildered, mostly due to the fact that it was anticipated that Nero would fulfill the responsibilities that are associated with the dominant, masculine role in his capacity as emperor. Following the passage of some time, Nero enters into a marriage with a young male slave who is the same age as he is. His given name is, in fact, Sperus. He pretended to be a guy in Roman culture in order to win their acceptance. This was done for the purpose of obtaining their approval. The purpose of this demonstration is to show that even those who are in positions of authority are capable of acting in a way that strikes a balance between their own personal preferences and the desires of the general public. If, on the other hand, we were to evaluate Emperor Nero according to the norms of today, we would find that a number of his actions were quite disquieting. In order to ensure that the general public perceived him as the dominant male role in his life. For instance, Nero created a romantic relationship with the young man Sporus, with the intention of ensuring that he was seen as such. It was a young man named Sporus, having the child castrated for the sole purpose of exercising control and improving. One's image was a heinous act that should be avoided at all costs. There are further instances of Nero's cruel or abusive actions toward his lovers. Nevertheless, it is difficult to know for certain what the whole reality is. This is despite the fact that there are additional instances. Even within the historical allegation that Emperor Nero was the one who was responsible for a sexual affair with his younger mother. Agrippina is the assertion that is the most worrisome that has been made about him. This accusation appears to be supported by evidence, which suggests that it is accurate. More specifically, in the writings of the historian Suetonius's history and the lives of the Caesars are presented in the Tacitus Annals in a manner that is more careful. According to the statements made by the two persons, Agrippina supposedly created the partnership in order to maintain her power over Nero while he was serving as emperor of Rome. Despite the fact that the accusation of incest is a problematic component of the legendary darkness that surrounds Nero, it is largely considered by credible experts all over the world that the accusation of incest is accurate. The term terrible innovation has been used by historians to describe this breakthrough. Exemplifies how opponents of the Roman government in ancient times used sexual slander, which was the most shocking taboo, to intentionally ruin people's reputations. This provides as a powerful explanation of how they did this. Nevertheless, Tiberius, another emperor, is regarded in this light despite the severity of the crimes that Nero took. More worrying, particularly with regard to the method in which he interacted with the young people who were in close proximity to him. Because Tiberius was misusing his power over the people he cared about, he is usually referred to as one of the most brutal criminals. This is because he was abusing his position. This is due to the fact that he was abusing the power that he had. He showed a huge level of interest in much younger guys, and his interactions with them have provided him with a great deal of success. In the history of the Vatican, he was considered to be one of the most sexually disgusting emperors, as stated by the judgments of a number of historians. Many of the instances happened a very long time ago, and a large number of them took place, placed in such a way that it is not apparent to the person looking at it. Tiberius spent his later years in opulent villas on the islands of the Mediterranean, particularly on the island of Capri. These homes were specifically designed for him. A few of these residences were extraordinary in their level of luxury, despite the fact that multiple studies have demonstrated that they were also utilized to satisfy his sexual wants. Those who were officially hired as servants were brought in to bring boys. This was done in order to fulfill his sexual needs. There is a good chance that an assortment of the rumors that have been going around regarding Tiberius are accurate. It is an exaggeration to say that. Numerous horrifying facts were frequently provided by Roman historians in order to portray the residents of Rome as being in a more dangerous position than they actually were. On the other hand, in spite of the fact that it is somewhat accurate, it also offers a scary picture of the way that ultimate authority was mistreated during the time of the Roman Empire. This is true even if it is only a statement.